So I am still from I don't even know who attended my last talk, but I was talking about creating systemic compassion. I'm kind of still on that mode and been trying to find a format in which to uh, roll that out. And be careful what you ask the universe because it will just come to you in abundance. And I'm like, okay, now I've got too many ways to do it. And so trying to settle on one particular way. And I think I've kind of decided that, but I'd forgotten how much the Gate of Sweet Nectar was about compassion. That was a wonderful service this morning. Um, at Yokoji, we only do it once a year for Obon. So nice that you do that all the time. It's nice to revisit that and talk about taking care of the hungry ghosts and ourselves, which is not separate from any other aspect of ghost. So the format that I have chosen to do a series of talks about compassion and creating systemic compassion and is really, I'm going to take Thich Nhat Hanh's poem. He wrote this in 1978, Please Call Me by My True Name. Some of you may be familiar with this. The book is entitled Just Call Me by My True Names, but the poem in the book on page 72, if anybody has this, you can certainly read along. Please call me by my true names. And you can turn, I mean, life is a koan in and of itself. And so since I love doing koan study, I will use the various stanzas of this poem as koans for entering into how to create systemic compassion, first starting with ourselves, and then expanding that out to the rest of the world. So let me just read this poem to you, with you. Thich Nhat Hanh writes, don't say that I will depart tomorrow. Even today, I am still arriving. Look deeply. Every second I am arriving. To be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with still fragile wings, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I am a mayfly metamorphosizing on the surface of the river. I am the bird that swoops down to swallow that mayfly. I am a frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond. And I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands. And I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm, it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast, it fills the four oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up and the door of my heart could be left open the door of compassion. So when I read this, I thought I could not have thought of any better way of talking about compassion than the late Reverend Todd. He certainly gave the world a true example of that compassion, since he Vietnamese, he built his Zen Center in France, one of the colonizers of Vietnam. What a way to embrace, the good and the bad and the ugly and the beautiful that happens to countries, to the world, to people, by building a Zen Center in what could be considered enemy camp by some. And he really talks about that. He truly embraced this whole oneness that compassion is. And compassion is not always nice. We want to call those things that are compassionate, what we consider to be good, and those things that we consider to be evil, we want to separate from. That's just kind of a natural thing that we do. We are attracted to some things and averse to other things, and we do this pull me, push you thing all the time. Is that a Dr. Dolittle reference? Anybody remember that animal? Was it pull me, push you? Oh, there we go. Somebody remembers. And that's where the suffering lies, is in really not understanding that we are, and not experiencing directly that we are truly one. And that oneness, it does not exclude those things that we consider to be absolutely abhorrent, that we have to look at the whole picture, honestly and truthfully, compassionately, in order to really experience ourselves fully as human beings, to really understand why it is we do things that are beautiful at times, absolutely amazing at times, but also absolutely devastatingly horrendous at other times. And that full spectrum of humanity is who we all are. So this poem starts out at a very interesting place. I'm still arriving. How do we show up to ourselves? First of all, first thing in the morning, what's the first thing we think of when we wake up in the morning? That alarm goes off. I created a habit many years ago of starting with Zazen, and even my cats go along with it, because they know there's no food until I'm done with sitting. And so even though they will be meowing and chattering, I've got 4 of them, because they want me probably to wake up and hurry up with Zazen so they can eat. But they'll meow, and then as soon as I get up and assume the position, they all are quiet. So they train me, but I've trained them too, that the sitting comes first, because I found this as a purely practical means. That's the best way for me to start my day, is all the jumble of whatever nightmares I've had, if any, need to be resolved. Oh, that was another thing I noticed, that the wording that you changed for karma, that karma be resolved. Nice change, not that it be ended, but resolved. Taking notes everywhere I can, and to add to my vocabulary of compassion, because there's no way out of karma. Karma is going to, we are creating it. We are karma. We're not separate from that. We are the result of all that has happened in the past, and we are creating the future that will come after us. I apologize. I attempted the picture of Avalokiteshvara. This is a statue that's about this high on my altar, and I took a really close-up picture of it, but I obviously overdid it because I cut off Avalokiteshvara's head, so I'll have to crop that down so you can see it, because this is the model of compassion in Buddhism, a thousand hands and a thousand eye in each hand, and all the heads of the Avalokiteshvara, and it's three dimensional, so it's all the way around. Can see and take care of everything that's going on in the universe and the world all at the same time. And we do this. This is who we are. We are taking care of everything as we sit, as we do zazen, as we practice this practice as our lives, and not something separate. But how do we show up when we go out into the world, or at home with our families, our animals, or my immediate family? And my waking up this morning, I studied Japanese tea ceremony, and my tea teacher's 80th birthday was this past week. So we threw her a party last night, and my place is an absolute mess from this party, because everyone was like rearranging my furniture and taking pictures and celebrating. There were balloons. So it was a wonderful, fun time. But then there's the aftermath that comes the next day, that I'm, going to have to clean up. So there are messes that we make as we go through life. They happen on a daily basis. Sometimes they're big and party filled, and sometimes they're just things we do wrong. We go wrong. We make mistakes, and that happens. But what do we do after the fact? What do we do with it then? There's always this cleanup that has to happen. And how do we not separate? Because that's the part that I struggle with. The minute you try to take any aspect of your life and verbalize it, starting with, you split the world. As soon as you open your mouth, you split the world into two. You're automatically in this dualistic form, which is not a bad thing, because we're the absolute, which is this wonderful oneness that we exist in, cannot arise without the relative, and they exist simultaneously and symbiotically, and without separation. But the separations are part of what we live with every day. There are consequences, however. There's karma that happens as a result of those separations, and that's where the rubber hits the road. Because certainly we can, and we've seen ourselves do this. We create policies and rules, guidelines, practices that are supposed to be, keep the people working together peacefully and in harmony. And I work in an office. I still work in HR. 2 more years to retirement. I'm looking so forward to that. And that in which I actually write policies, for a healthcare organization on maintaining rules and corrective action in departments, and diversity rules, and all those things that we have. And we're trying to create a workplace where it's inclusive and safe for people to raise issues if they come up. And that in and of itself generates problems. You have people who will take a policy and they will weaponize it in a way, and so that's easy to do with rules. I often get calls, daily. I get calls from people who are claiming to be discriminated against. There are specific criteria for what the various laws, and there are many, consider to be discrimination. So those are the laws that I have to abide by. So I'm often having to tell people that what they're experiencing is not considered legal discrimination, although they are human beings and they're having this experience, and they need to be cared for. So how do I go beyond what the law says and make sure this person gets taken care of? And I supervise staff members who are doing these types of investigations. And the one advice I give them repeatedly is, when you're talking to someone, you're not just answering the question, you're answering the person. You are, see that person not as your assignment or the respondent, as they're called in our legal documents, but as the person who's there. That person is suffering, even if their suffering doesn't fit the criteria of what is legal discrimination, but that suffering is still happening. Sometimes that suffering is, self-inflicted, because they've actually made up stuff in their head that there's not a lot of evidence to support that it's actually happening. But for them, the suffering is still for them. It's in their experience, and we can't discount that. So how do we show up to that on a daily basis? How do we bring ourselves as full human beings to be present with suffering? And that's the koan. So I like the fact that Thich Nhat Hanh very carefully starts this poem with, "I am still arriving," and showing up every day. When in looking deeply, he finds all of the aspects of himself that are on these so-called divided spectrums of good and evil, victim and those that are attacking the other person. It was really, just when I read this the first time, I was like, taken away. It's very moving that he could see that we are, both the cause and the effect. And how is it that we as a nation support these divides? We sell right now, where the Russian-Ukrainian war is going. So we're selling arms to Ukraine, I think. And there have been several instances in our history. Some of you will probably recall them, that there have been sides and skirmishes that the United States has supported, and then at some point in the future, that's the side that we supported now turns against us, and the weapons that we sold them are now being fired at our own people, our own soldiers. So these sides are not clean. They're not, there's not this all good and this all bad. There's these so-called absolutes are full of shades of difference and nuance, and not quite so easy to discern at times. Try as we might, there are these, we want the box. This is good, this is bad, get rid of the bad. One of the more, I guess I'll call it controversial discussions I had with the diversity committee that I sit on, was how not to marginalize the people that we don't like, because that tends to be the solution that we want. During the Trump administration, there were these factions of people that seem to have been given permission to publicly discriminate against people that did not agree with their points of view. And some of us, I among them was kind of shocked. We've been through the civil rights movement, we've been through the women's rights movement and the LGBTQ movement. All these movements have happened. Didn't we already do all this work? Why are we back doing this again? What did we do wrong? And I was daring enough to point out, it says we didn't get rid of it. It went into shadow and it got stronger. And because we tried to marginalize it, because these groups had been marginalized by this other group. And so the way we fought back was by doing the same thing to them. And I said, it should be clear at this point that this sort of marginalization of what we don't like does not work. So I said, We need to invite those people that we disagree with to the table, bring them out into the light, and give them safe space to express their points of view. I got no positive reaction to that suggestion. They were like, they just looked at me like I had lost my mind. And I'm glad to say that, yes, I did. I lost my mind. And that's still my position, that you do not solve things by hiding from them. You don't, that the problems are still there, still very present, and still running the show, running you. And instead of dealing with them head on, instead of really seeing yourself through the pirate, the weapons dealer, the people who are running the labor camps, those people who think they're right in what they do. So how can you be with, or be those people from their point of view and really understand? Because they're not doing this because they think they're wrong. They think that they're justified in their actions, that there's some bigger cause, noble cause that they're actually trying to create for those people who agree with them, horrible though it may be. Even Hitler thought he was doing a good thing for Germany, and Hitler was certainly not the worst of them throughout history, but he's more recent, and completely horrendous results of what he did. But he thought he was doing good for Germany. So can we see that? Can we experience that and heal that? Because we are not separate from those very horrendous acts. So this is where the practice really comes into play. Can we sit and be one with all sides of our humanity? The good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, the wonderful, beautiful mayfly that is, becoming its full self just before your eyes as you're watching it, and knowing that that mayfly is some other creature's dinner. As human beings once were too. We were not always at the top of the food chain. My teacher, Tenshin Fletcher Loshi, Seisen's first husband, and is fond of saying, we didn't get to the top of the food chain by being nice. So we too have engaged in practices and types of warfare to get to where we are. And we sit here as beneficiaries of that not niceness that got us to the top of the food chain. We are in that privilege. We are that privilege. So can we understand the privilege that we have? Being here, California. I don't know what the weather, when I used to live when I was living in San Diego, it was like perpetual spring down there. There was never a bad or ugly day, or they were very rare. I don't know what it's like today. Up here, it's cloudy in LA. But is it sunny and beautiful down there in San Diego? Or your national city, but are you guys having clouds down there as well? But we live here on the West Coast, where a lot of things are much more accepted and tolerated than in other places in our own country. And talked about even in his, because I was in Austin, Texas, even as college town liberal as Austin, Texas is, there was still some very openly biased elements of the conversations that I had with some people, starting with the Uber driver that I had from the airport to the hotel. And I just have to tell this because pain is relative. In LA, the gas prices went up they were like up to $7-8 a gallon. The Uber driver was complaining that his gas prices had gone from $1.95 to $3.99. and it was absolutely horrible, and it was all Biden's fault. So, so there's a definite point of view that, you know, I was with a friend of mine. We just looked at each other like, well, we would just kill for $3.99 a gallon here. But obviously, this was a pain point for him, and I had to think, okay, this is relative. I mean, he'd gone from $1.45 to $3.99. That had an effect on his budget and the work that he does as an Uber driver. So I thought, okay, let me let go of my $7 a gallon gas and put myself in his perspective, and be him. Because if I know myself, I am you. You are me. Um, I am the Buddha, and the Buddhas are me. There is no separation, and all the separation is that we imagine, that we make up, that we conjure, that we create, is delusion. And delusion is not a derogatory term. It's not a bad thing. We engage in delusional activities, on a momentary basis. Just me sitting here talking about this yapping that we do about the Dharma, all delusion. But I'm appreciating Thich Nhat Hanh's point, because he now gives me kind of a launching point, and I'll use the stanzas as koan as this. And koans are just kind of put them in perspective. I distinctly remember my Zumi Roshi calling Zazen a gimmick, and I audibly gasped at that reference. And I went, how could he call this sacred practice a gimmick? What is he saying? But it really is, it's a trick to really trick your body into being present in the moment. And so I engage in this trickery, if you will, every day, first thing in the morning while the cats are waiting, just to center myself and remind myself, and really practice and experience myself as this non-separate being moving out to this non-separate universe in this world. Koans are the same thing. They are a trick to get us to experience these different aspects, and it's not about all those old these old dead guys who wrote all those koans. It's how is this living in me right here, right now, and to really, it's this kind of heading it away, because you have to take them in as words, and then let that filter into your experience. So it is about the experience of compassion for those things that we look out. I'm looking out my front window right now. There's this beautiful little hummingbird, that is, pollinating or taking the nectar from the tree. And my cat, who's on this side of the glass, is doing that little chattering thing. I'm sure if my cat were able to get out that window, that little hummingbird would be his second breakfast or his lunch. It's almost lunchtime. So what say you? How are you compassionate with yourself, with the world, with those things that you agree with, those things that you disagree with, those things that are absolutely amazingly beautiful in the world, and those things that are just absolutely horrendous in the world, and everything in between? How are you compassionate with that? How are you without all of those things? And thank you so much for inviting me back. But I look forward to hearing the teaching from you at this point.